Good morning. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Kwagala, your host. With the new year, that promises to be characterized by high-octane politics. 2025 is rather off to a rocky and sad start. We begin in Parliament, where the country continues to pay tribute to the life, memory, and legacy of the late Honorable Ssegirinya, the former Member of Parliament representing Kawempe North constituency in the National Legislature. Also on the program, we discussed the performance of the Leader of the Opposition in the House, the Right Honorable Ssenyonyi, who took over the reins of authority from his predecessor, the Right Honorable Matthias Mpuuga, amid a very challenging political environment. In Parliament again, we have the issue of the State House, which has made a new request to the Parliament to have an additional 3 billion, which it has justified as necessary to meet its new urgent and pressing needs. Our viewers, you are most welcome to this program. I now have the honor and the pleasure to introduce to you my distinguished guests who are with me here in studio to help us make a sense of today's topics. Let me begin with my immediate left. Is Dr. Tolitto Charles Atia, who is the Associate Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Dr. Tolitto is also a legal scholar. Doctor, Happy New Year. It's a pleasure to have you on the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Happy New Year, Isaac, and Happy New Year to our listeners and viewers. Definitely, it's exciting to be back here. It's back again to debate and with energy and gusto.
Many thanks indeed, Doctor, for joining us. Next to Doctor is Professor Mwambutsya Nebesa, who is a distinguished historian and academic. Professor is also a renowned political commentator and a regular on the platform. Prof, it's always a pleasure to have you. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning to the viewers and good morning to fellow panelists and everybody who is listening and viewing, and I'm glad to be here to share with you issues and views and ideas of state and nation building.
Many thanks indeed. And of course, next to Professor is the gentleman, Mr. Apollo Tusiime, who is a representative of our public watchdog in Parliament, the Uganda Parliamentary Press Association, where he serves as the General Secretary. Apollo, Happy New Year. It's a pleasure to have you. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning, our viewers and listeners. Happy New Year to you, Kwagala and my fellow colleagues here. I am no longer the General Secretary for Uganda Parliamentary Press. My term expired with the end of last year, so I bowed out. I did not contest again. But I am still a senior reporter at Parliament. Thank you.
Many thanks for joining us, Apollo. Apollo, I am going to ask you to get us started. You occupy a very vantage position, being a journalist, one that specializes in covering the operations and goings-on of the Parliament. Let us begin by assessing the performance of the Leader of the Opposition, Right Honorable Ssenyonyi, who has marked a full year in that position. From your point of view, how would you describe first and foremost his performance in Parliament before you make an examination of how he has performed?
Well, I appreciate and I admire the courage and the works of Right Honorable Ssenyonyi. It's from our side as journalists, it's a pleasure to have our colleague occupying a powerful office as the leader of opposition in parliament is. And in short, I admire his work, and maybe if I'm talk about his performance, I would say his office has done its best within the current political environment. The political environment, or the environment within parliament, is not as different from the political environment outside parliament. If you are the leader of opposition in parliament, you go almost through what other opposition members go through every day. And I must say from the start that Right Honorable Ssenyonyi was very unfortunate. The moment he was appointed the leader of opposition in parliament, immediately his appointment was received with hostility. You remember how in the beginning he talked about how he was even denied staff in his office. I mean, they didn't allow him to recruit staff, and we all know that he was not the most favored candidate for that position, especially from the people he was going to work with at parliament. Right from the Speaker of Parliament, they did not like his appointment to that office, and that is the environment he has worked in for all this whole year up to here. If you are a leader of opposition, one, you are not at good terms with the leadership of parliament, especially the speaker, then you can't hope to do much, especially in this parliament where the speaker is very powerful and can influence many things, including some of those decisions that can determine the delivery of your services. We all remember how Ssenyonyi started off. Of course, the roles of his office are majorly to check the excesses of government, right, in parliament.
How would you rate him in that respect?
Yes.
The question of accountability.
Yes. We know how, for instance, on the issue of oversight, how Ssenyonyi and his colleagues, the shadow cabinet, had started off a plan to do oversight visits, to conduct oversight visits across the city and across the country. But the first time they decided to go to Kampala city at a time when we were all talking about the bad roads of Kampala. I remember a call came in from Parliament that he should immediately return to Parliament, and when he asked why, because some journalists had moved out with him. When he asked why, they said you have no permit, you had not gone through the normal procedures to procure vehicles and everything that you are using in the field. And a directive came out recalling the vehicles of Parliament while he was still in the field. And you can imagine members of Parliament had to jump in taxis to go back to Parliament. So I'm trying to show you how, about the hardships his administration must have gone through. Well, that's one example, but let me also remind you how Ssenyonyi also on the floor of Parliament, he moved to actually on another in another case, when he went to the Lower hospital site, he also blocked at the gate, like all others who have tried to go on that on that site to do oversight. So I from my side, I can say he has done his best in the current political environment, and you can't say he has not performed with all those hardships and roadblocks along his way.
Thank you, Apollo, for your perspective. Professor, the Right Honorable Joel Ssenyonyi has been dubbed as the youngest leader of opposition in our parliamentary history as a nation. I don't know if that is consequential enough to assess his performance in parliament, but let us now turn to the question of his leadership as the captain of the opposition troops in parliament. Do you think he's been able to galvanize all the diverse fronts, political parties, and elements of the opposition to push for a united campaign against the ruling NRM government in terms of components of the rule of law, the promotion of human rights, the question of accountability and corruption, so to speak, his comprehensive term as the leader of the opposition there?
Thank you, but I think those who have said he's the youngest leader of opposition in history of Uganda need to check their history. I don't think that is true. And that assertion of yours has prompted me to give a wider context of the office of the leader of opposition in Parliament in Uganda. The Parliament has dominated with the majority of Africans, or almost all Africans actually, started in 1961 when Beni Chiwanuka was a prime minister. And the leader of opposition was Milton Obote.
That was pre-independence?
Yeah, that was pre-independence, but that was the African Parliament. It was still the African Parliament after the other legislative council, which was dominated by the whites. And the difference between Milton Obote and subsequently these ones of today is that for him, he was also the leader of the party. He was both the leader of the opposition party, UPC, and at the same time, the leader of opposition. That gave him a leeway, both power and authority, and he didn't have to consult anybody because he was a leader of both. Subsequent to that, of course, after independence, we had the DP in opposition, and it was led by Basil Bataringaya, who later crossed to UPC, the ruling party, but for him, I think he was less than 30. In fact, far younger than Ssenyonyi. So it's not true that we have only that this is the youngest. So, but Basil Bataringaya was not the leader of DP because the leader of DP did not make it to parliament. But under the parliamentary system, if Chiwanuka had won and come to parliament, he would be both the leader of his party DP and the leader of opposition. But he did not make it to parliament because of the distorted elections in the Buganda Kingdom, where he was subjected to being first elected to Ruchiko, although even that one he lost. But even if he had come to Ruchiko, the Mengo Ruchiko group was hostile to Chiwanuka. They would not have even sent him to parliament. So anyway, there was Basil Bataringaya, the youngest, I think, who later crossed to UPC. And subsequently, we have had these other leaders of opposition. I think also Semo Gerere, when he was in parliament, he was both the leader of his party and the leader of opposition. So that gave him also that leeway. Now, the other ones who are not coinciding, they have problems, they have challenges, that you are the leader of opposition in parliament, but you are not the leader of your political party. So that is the situation in which Ssenyonyi finds himself. But I think he has done quite well in respect of oversight function. As he has pointed out, he has been going around, even before he became leader of opposition, he was already doing very well as chairman of the committee, Kosase, and he has proceeded to do that kind of thing in oversight function. The recent ones, I think, he prompted Parliament to look into the issues of the bank, of the central bank, this money, Bank of Uganda, which got lost. So he has done that one, but I think he's still wanting in respect of introducing new ideas. He is doing oversight function in service delivery of government. But you see, that's not all. You need to come up with new ideas to challenge the bills that government comes up with, the policies that government comes up with, without necessarily reacting to the bills that the government has brought and the failure to provide certain services. I don't know whether you are getting me and the audience is getting me, that you need also to come up and challenge. For example, when there is the State of the Nation address, you point out the weaknesses within the State of the Nation address that the head of state has not covered. Or you will have come up with yours even before the head of state gives his. And as a leader of opposition in parliament, he could give some of his views outside parliament and also within parliament. So there he still needs to do better.
Some information, Professor. It is in the administration of parliament, it is mandatory that the leader of opposition has to also table every time the head of state gives the State of the Nation address. The leader of opposition also presents his alternative address on the State of the Nation. So even when the budget is read, they also present an alternative budget, also tabled in parliament. So those ones, the leader of opposition has been doing it.
Yeah, he has been doing it, but I'm saying it is wanting. He's not doing it well.
Thank you.
Because
it's a critic.
Because if you look, if we were to be asked and say, what did the leader of opposition propose that was an alternative to the government side that has caught up the minds of the citizens, you hardly get it. It means he has not been effective. Leader of opposition is also an administrative position. So he has to mobilize the opposition generally. And there he has met challenges, because I think there is this MP from DP who was hostile to him, who was even proposing an amendment in the constitution to remove him. So he started off with that baptism of fire. You are coming, you are new, you are young in the parliament, and all of a sudden somebody is coming from your side. Moreover, it is curious that somebody from opposition is now fighting against somebody from opposition. So there he met challenges. He has put up a spirited fight, but I think then that makes his administration, in terms of mobilizing and organizing the opposition, those challenges are not necessarily from him. They are now organizational, and they are more or less structural, and they are those who actually wanted to make him fail, both from within his party, by the way, because he had replaced somebody controversially, and then from the other parties in opposition. And I think he has tried to maneuver through. So one would say that somewhere, somehow, he has got what we call relational intelligence. You know, he has relational intelligence, how to manage them, because they have not paralyzed him, although they intended to paralyze him. So he is somebody whose opposition is from government, and then he opposition from within opposition, and he's trying to steer through all those when he's young, not necessarily in age, but young in parliament and young in the opposition, because he's not only young in parliament, he's also, he's young in parliament and young in the position of leader of opposition. And he's trying to navigate through all those ones. So one would say that he has tried his best, but I would say that where he needs to put up his socks is to see through government policies and give us fresh ideas about how to manage the affairs, the public affairs of this country, because since the leader of opposition of his party is not in parliament, the focus now is on him to give us those formal, official opposition views and ideas.
Thank you, Professor. Before I bring
before
in...
he comes in,
okay.
one important issue I also need to highlight before Dr. comes in, which I think will be good for the debate, is also the issue of the leader of opposition being a full member of the Commission of Parliament. And we have heard, even from the address he made 2 days ago, he has severally pointed it out that he, Right Honorable Ssenyonyi, has never attended a parliamentary commission meeting, not because he doesn't want to attend or is not available when they need him, but they deliberately exclude him from those meetings. He points out that only once he was invited for a commission meeting, and you know the Parliamentary Commission is the body that works on almost administrative issues of Parliament, even the welfare of members of Parliament and everything. So it's a very important body. And he says that the only time he was invited for the Parliamentary Commission meeting, he was invited only one day to the meeting, and he was even away. They knew that he was away. He won't be available. So I thought I would also bring.
They are deliberately failing him.
So that is the environment. The current leader of opposition.
The context.
Thank you for highlighting that. And before I bring in Dr. Tolitto, Prof, in a minute, related to the issue that Apollo has raised, do you think that the performance of the leader of opposition has been handicapped by the work methods of his own party? Because to juxtapose it to Apollo's issue, there seems to be a school of thought that given the struggles where the former leader of opposition, the Right Honorable Matthias Mpunga, was involved, implicated in certain corruption activities related to the Parliamentary Commission, the attitude of the new leader of the opposition is hostile towards that body, and as such, they cannot cooperate, and it's a directive of the party. How would you approach that issue?
I think that's what we are saying, is that his tenure has started off with challenges, not necessarily as a person, for lack of, say, emotional, relational, or cognitive intelligence, but also stems from the controversial way in which he came to office, which is both from his party, NUP, and also from Parliament, because even in Parliament he meets hostility, not only from opposition parties, but from the Speaker and from the Commission, which he actually was opposed to its methods of work. So he's meeting challenges from both within and from without, and he's trying to steer through. But then I think that is almost weakening the office of the leader of opposition, that he has no time to think and reflect and give us views of alternative policies, alternative ideas to manage this country. But those who are trying to fail him also should know that they are also failing the country, because the leader of opposition or the opposition party in parliament is supposed to be an alternative government which should be helping the government in power to check itself and also fresh ideas to manage the country generally. But he has met those contextual challenges, and we hope he will manage to steer through. But then, under those circumstances, we as a country and as parliament, we are missing on opportunities that would ideally be activities of the leader of opposition.
Doctor, what are your impressions of the man and his politics? How would you appraise his performance for his first full year in that position?
Yeah, thanks for that. And looking at what my colleagues have already pointed out, and without getting into sounding repetitive, I think particularly Professor Nebesa takes an interesting trajectory when you choose to look at both the person and then the position. He's given us a good backgrounding. You know, power stems from somewhere. Attitude stems from somewhere. If you look at Obote, as he put it, leader of opposition and head of party, and in parliament, means that within every moment of decision making or thought process, besides the elements of the usual consultation, he had himself, you know, to come to quick conclusions and make also quick prepositions every time formed with the situation. The same thing with, of course, then it changes. We see the issue of Bataringaya and then the other Kiwanuka as leader. Then Apollo also lays a good background, because who is Ssenyonyi, you know, and yes, fairly young, both fairly young as a person, young in politics, young in leadership, because we know that Ssenyonyi, actually, one thing that has not come out is the events that culminated shortly before he catapults into politics were also dramatic. We know that he was a newsroom reporter, an anchor,
4.5 years ago,
yes,
he was in the newsroom.
Yes, and shortly before that, he actually got kicked out of the newsroom. And when you go to the inner, when you go to the inner story, you begin to see the invisible hand of the state, you know. But of course, also, and justifiably so, probably it was not a role he was going to be able to continue doing within the demands and tenets of journalism that calls for, you know, objectivity, fairness, and, you know, all that, because he had certainly taken a side. But besides from that, I think besides that tumultuous, you know, invitation or reception to political life, like again Professor clearly points out, I think he has sailed fairly well as a person. The only indictment I have, and not necessarily for the Right Honorable Joel Ssenyonyi as a person, but as a leader within Parliament, which is already a fractured and disgraced institution, in the realm of the democratic space. The parliament, the Ugandan parliament within the novel democratic space is not functioning anymore. It's on a mark time, and there is a lot of evidence that we can bring to the table, to augment that statement, and I'll come to that shortly. So for me, to answer you directly, for me it's a comsi 50-50. He's managed within a certain realm. He still has real challenges. I want to pitch him against probably their own value proposition.
As a party?
As a party. When you look at NUP, the National Unity Party, and look around Africa, look around the political parties in Africa, they stem off very closely to want and try to work like the EEF of South Africa and the South African Parliament. And one, I want to look at the importance and value of debate in Parliament. You see, Parliament, yes, makes laws, and probably that is all we tend to hype about Parliament. But Parliament, for effective, enriched, and entrenched citizenship, Parliament owes to debate issues. And that is why the nature of parliamentary procedure, amongst the other functions incumbent upon it, is that it's allowed to debate. Now, this debate is crucial because Parliament forms more or less the highest but also safest space, to debate issues that affect person, governance, and government. And this Parliament cannot even pass with a feeble 35% on that issue. And that's also, it even makes it more serious because the parliamentarians themselves are not able to debate issues. We as citizens who they represent, we as citizens who look up to them as our leaders and follow them because they hold our agency. So that means nothing is being debated, And why is it an issue? It is an issue because then governance is about selling choices. The government in place definitely has a set of prepositions they keep throwing. And the only way they can get them working, or the only way they can get to legalize these issues, is to go to debate them in Parliament, so that then they can get the people's mandate. But this Parliament is not debating.
So
Ssenyonyi,
Doctor, in the context of the performance of his role as the leader of the opposition, has he been able to improve that aspect?
No, not at all. Feebly, yes. And Professor pointed out, you see, other than, because the trend we have had and where they seem to excel, we are having, what you'd call knee-jerk or a reactionary approach, to issues. You cannot, you see, an opposition, again, like the good professor has said, is a government in waiting. So we would expect that, and what does that sentence mean? That supposing this government fell today, tomorrow, we should have this opposition ready to pick and run. You cannot say that of this opposition, because leave alone the presidential State of Nation address, of course, which is somewhat the total sum or the whole sum of the current government's value proposition. So it is important, but the actual workings of government, I'll give you two or three And I started by relating to the EFF.
As you sum up, Doctor.
Yes, if you listened, if you watched the South African Parliament and you watched the EEF that Noop tries to imitate, the only thing they have succeeded is imitated their dressing. But boy, oh boy, the caliber of those boys in that house, 3 of them takes on the ANC that probably has a stronger foundational legacy, equally strong parliamentarians. These NRM parliamentarians, who is there who can actually sustain a debate that say the Ssenyonyis cannot put a pitch against? Maybe the hostility from the speaker and the administration of the house, but of course, we also need to accept that that is really a crowd. Probably that is also the other problem. So for me, what I want to see, and I just want to reiterate probably what Prof and my colleague Apple have put, is that we expect, yes, he's done so much against a difficult environment, but we intend to see better. Shakespeare says leaders are made of sterner stuff. They are there because they are probably our best. We don't want any excuse. Under the circumstances they are in, if you are a football juggler and you're in front of a goalpost, if you can't go past the players, you create a penalty.
You want to see the best.
We want to see something. So Ssenyonyi is a good friend of mine. I would say he's had a fair time, but he's got a lot of work. We need to see some debate in that parliament. They have conceded unusual, what you'd call unusual goals. We have lost 3 key. There was a constitutional amendment. There were a couple of constitutional amendments in this parliament in 2015. Those constitutional amendments, I'll mention 3 areas that are very critical for us and probably had showed some progress. One is the Public Finance and Management Bill. One of the things it had managed to do was create some sanity. I know at some point we're going to discuss the issue of the supplementaries. That amendment, Section 4, had allowed Parliament to regain control over a government that is running amok. Because look at our debt. The issue of supplementary bills had become a nuisance. With that amendment, there was some certainty. Instead of managing the transition in a change of financial year with supplements, Parliament would already know in advance, for 3 years, what kind of money do you need? But it didn't even go 6 months. The same bill was re-amended, and Parliament basically surrendered its constitutional power and control over government on this issue of public finances. And this is dangerous because look, all these things we're discussing, we are going into this oil thing. This oil we have already had the president publicly say, and some of the other leaders, they are calling it their thing. Oil money is not a joke. When it runs into this economy, people are going to go mad. We are running around with this little money we have. When oil gets here, so in a nutshell, as you say, I should wind up. So the debate, we have considered a lot. We have considered on a number of bills that has given back power, or not power, has again let loose government. In conclusion, I'll tell you this: I woke up very happy this morning. That's why I tried to dress in my favorite blue shirt. I watched the farewell speech of Biden, and unusually for a man that old and a man with public experience of 50 years, his speech was very short, and it was more of a lamentation. And he said 2 important things. One, he wanted the Americans to be wary of the oligarchy of wealthy people coming to power, and warned against the excess of power confined in the person of the presidency. If America, with what it has, with what it has achieved with the democracy it has, is still wary of controlling power or people in power. And then here.
Thank you, Doctor, for your perspective. Apollo, let us now move to the question of the interface of the State House and the Parliamentary Committee on Presidential Affairs, where State House has put before Parliament a request for an additional 3 billion, justified as necessary to meet the salary and gratuity needs of the new staff of units of the State House that the President has now consistently created.
Arbitrarily created.
Arbitrarily. Arbitrarily created. We have a proliferation of them. I think we have now lost count. The latest being the State House Investors Protection Unit. We have one on land, we have one on corruption.
Whatever it means.
Name it. So the question is, we have a scarcity of resources as a country. We have so many competing interests for a very small bag of the national purse. Is the State House justified in presenting this request?
The request is coming way after the units have been created and are in existence. So it's unfair maybe to
There is a word, I don't know if it is French or Latin, a fait accompli.
Fait accompli.
Yeah.
Too late.
Yes. You cannot accuse
The damage is done.
Yes, it is the president within his powers who created the units. The units are there. Yes, like you said, perhaps the debate should be on why these units should, have been left out during this process of rationalization. Maybe they should, we should start a debate on whether they should also be taken back to the mother ministries, because every unit has a ministry where it falls.
No, but these ones you see, it's within the mandate of the president to appoint his staff. And most of these units are actually under the president's office. And probably that goes back, maybe you need to look at that constitutional amendment I'm talking about. Because it then gives away the opportunity for control, which actually is it's a constitutional mandate placed upon Parliament. In Article 195 S. So, they have given it away. And like you clearly pointed out, amid its scarce resources. And then they are all just watching.
Yeah.
And it's like business as usual. So the question then probably, Apollo, you would like us to help understand is that, is it just that the pressure from, they call it above, I don't know whether it's above or from the side, is it that so overwhelming that 448 people cannot resist?
That is what I was saying. That now that they are now coming to Parliament, this now proves that there is power in Parliament to decide on whether, whether these units and agencies should still exist, whether we still need them. The fact that they are coming to Parliament for approval of a budget, because I see that this time, this is now Parliament approving the units, giving approval to these units. If they now, like they are saying, they need 3 billion for salaries of staff within these units. Now you are legitimizing the process through which these units were created. So I think the debate now should be on whether we need these units or not, and the debate now should be within members of Parliament, from this Presidential Affairs Committee now to the whole House of Parliament, to debate and make a decision on whether we still need the State House Anti-Corruption Unit, when there is the office of the IGG on one side, the office of the Auditor General on the other side, and all other agencies that work to fight corruption in government. So the 3 billion, already the justification is there. The president created the units. I don't think we can do much now to all lament on why the money is going, because the justification is there for the money to be what? To be spent.
Professor, what are your thoughts on this? Because State House is a notorious culprit of raiding the national purse. Each year, I think it presents about 2 or 3 supplementary budgets, justifying them as necessary to meet new and urgent needs for the well-being and I think the well-functioning of the president and his office. But the issue at hand now is that in light of the many priorities that we have as a nation, because now there is an aspect of making provision for resources to purchase for the president a new fleet. Then there is now the issue of the salaries and the gratuities for the new units that have been since created under the president's office. So are we prioritizing right as a country? Couldn't these resources be maybe channeled to other priorities for the benefit of the ordinary person?
Let me approach it like this. Somebody, I think a French scholar, forgotten the name, maybe the colleagues might remember him. He wrote a book and titled it Africa Works. Of course it was sarcastic, but it says Africa works. It works informally. The state works informally. We have a shadow state and or patronage, shadow state, whatever, invisible state, whatever you want to call it. That is the one that is governing the country. In most countries, and particularly in Uganda, under patronage system. And that Africa works. It works that way. So these other MPs you see, who are the Mandela Stadium MPs, this bloated cabinet, this bloated the RDCs and the rest, you know, those ones play one function. And at times the president indicates it, but people don't get him clearly. And those ones are for keeping the country, holding it together, so that we don't disintegrate. They are not there for competence, performance of government. Those ones are there officially, formally, above, for purposes of each group in Uganda, each social category group, knowing that they have somebody in Kampala or in Entebbe, or once in a while he goes home for Thanksgiving, you know, this new Thanksgiving, even when they are not Christians. That's when they remember to be Christians or Muslims.
Homecoming,
homeboys, and people are happy that Prado has come at home and is gathering the fuel, which is the taxpayers' money, and the president is happy about that. He has ever said it, that you just keep them, you just keep them there, they will be happy, and the population will be happy. You remember, I think it was Kazoro, somebody who told us when he met them and said, if Precor goes to Karamoja and lands there with a helicopter, and the peasants can come and get the grass and chew it, and we'll keep the Karamojong in place in Uganda. That is it. Otherwise, the president has his shadow state, his shadow people. And those are the ones he is asking, or they are asking the government, the parliament, to appropriate money for. But let me mention this one also, that you see, institutions or government or corporates run based on the official, formal, legal framework. Is it Weberian?
Yes,
Legal, yes. Whatever, rational framework, but also traditions in the institutions. So the legal, rational framework is what he's talking about, is not what is running Uganda today. It is the traditions. So since NRM came into power as a government and it has set up a system, it has also evolved a tradition. So the tradition is to have that shadow state run government, and the other ones are for peppering around and running around during elections, and the peasants are very happy that they have voted somebody. He comes with the latest suit. At least once in a while they can see somebody with the latest car and the latest suit and the latest glasses in the eyes, and they look at him as a tourist object, you know. Otherwise, that one which for the budget for which they ask for, is it? They have asked, how do they call it? That additional.
Additional.
That additional is actually running the real government that President Museveni is working with. The other ones are just shadow. We are talking about Ssenyonyi, the Ssenyonyi is being shadow government. But I want to tell you, most members of parliament and some of our ministers, cabinet ministers, are also shadow. There is the other one, there is that one which is working, and we know where power lies, you know. I think members, the listeners and the viewers have seen even the vice president going to pay homage to General Salim Saleh in Guru. And the speaker went there, the vice president went there, you know. And you have seen the situations where the first lady delegates the Nabanja, the prime minister is supposed to be as
and the vice president.
You see, the prime minister is supposed to supervise the minister of education, but the minister of education instructs her to go and represent her and read a speech for her. So we are discussing as if we have the legal Weberian, rational government running. No, we must be live. I think we should get live to how Africa works. That person wrote a book, I wish most people could read it. Africa works. That's how it works. It is like you find people in a jam, confused. One vehicle is facing east, another one at certain angle. But at times you see it becomes easier to get through the traffic jam than when there is police and there is traffic lights and we are organizing. We might stay in the traffic jam for 1 hour, but when we have confusion, at times you see us getting through. But that getting through is temporary. There will be a time when you can get in that jam for almost 7 hours, because that's not how the state should be run. So for us to develop a state, a functioning state, with functioning institutions and with legitimacy from the population, not like the situation in which we have where the state has lost legitimacy. I am saying this, I want everybody who is listening to bear with me that legitimacy comes out of trust. Who in Uganda trusts land administration? In Uganda. Who trusts revenue authority administration? Who trusts that you go to a government hospital, Mulago, Chirudo, whatever, and you get services? Who trusts KCCA? Who trusts UNEB? Who trusts police? Who trusts the justice? There is a lack of trust. You can't trust the bank, the central bank, that it can spend money. One goes to London, another one is sent to Japan. They ask who to whom. Nobody is giving accountability. I saw the governor was also saying, I don't know. Then the minister of finance was saying, I don't know. Then the controller general is the one who's supposed to control how money goes out. It's the opposite kind of auditor general. The controller general was, you mean this money went? I don't know how it went. Surely, under such a situation, are we running a functioning state in a modern country? You find incompetence everywhere. I don't know what we are going to do to turn around so that we run a state in the 21st century, a modern state, where there will be trust from the government. But anyway, all in all, what you people are pointing out and the question you are raising is a question of the shadow state that is there. And you are, people, we are here and Parliament is even shouting about that additional money they have asked. they are going to ask for supplementary. Be ready for it, and nobody should be shocked, because we have a shadow state and we have allowed it to be there. It has become a tradition. You know, traditions influence and shape the processes of an organization, be it corporate or government or whatever. So if we have allowed this tradition of a shadow state from the time the NRM system came into, or even before, then we should be ready for those additions, and there will be supplementary even. So it is not a surprise. In fact, they have asked for less. That is very little. They are going to ask for more, and it is going to be provided, because the tradition is there. The tradition is there that members of parliament must be meek. President Museveni, I have said it here before, I will say it again. When there was a debate of members of parliament had raised the issue that the president's office gets out of parliamentary buildings. You know, there is president's office in the parliamentary building, you know? And because of lack of space and whatever, the members of parliament were suggesting that the president's office should get out of that premises, go and rent somewhere or get another place so that they occupy those places. You know, you remember that? And the president, in one of his speeches, told them, you fellas, do you remember we captured you? We captured that parliament, you know? And he told Ssenyonyi at one time, I captured you. This parliament was captured. So what are you saying? I'm not getting out of that chambers because we captured you. And it was late there, and we stopped there, and it is a tradition, and we know. So please, those who are commenting on the addition, is it of 3
billion?
3 or 10? They are going to ask for 20 and 30 billion, and business will go on as usual.
Up a minute before we take a break.
It's a tradition.
Yes.
It's a tradition.
Before Doctor comes in, I agree with the professor when he says that this is just a drop in 3 billion.
We will ask for more.
We should be looking at the whole budget holistically, the budget for State House and the Office of the President. Because even in those requests that were presented this week, they are talking about 10 billion for replacing the whole fleet of the President. The President's fleet is about 69 vehicles. And we are not talking about how these vehicles are maintained. I mean, how much is spent on I mean, within that huge budget of State House. Because in last year's the 2022-2023 budget, State House, the total budget was around 667 billions. Now you can look at how much we spend on keeping the president in his office. So the 3 billion is little. We should be looking at the whole budget of State House. And I remember Honorable Ssenyonyi on the floor of Parliament speaking about the fleet of the president, 69 vehicles. When the whole country, we have ambulance that are just less than 30
That are functioning.
that are functioning in the whole country. This same week, the Auditor General's report that was presented to the Speaker of Parliament just 2 days ago highlighted the inefficiencies at Mulago Hospital. That the National Referral Hospital, the whole hospital, has 27 used ICU beds, and only 15 are operating. It is operating at 56%, the ICU at the National Referral. So those are the, while the budget of maintaining the equipment in Mulago Hospital is just a meager. It's around 1.8 billion. The whole budget of
annually
maintaining the equipment at Mulago National Referral Hospital. So those are the things we should be looking at the budgets vis-a-vis the priorities of the citizens. Not only this 3 billion, which is going for an intention that is already created and it is there.
Thank you, Apple and Professor, for your insights. Focus on Parliament now takes a short break. Do stay with us. We'll see you back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. We are glad that you're still watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we pay tribute to the late Honorable Ssegirinya, the now deceased former Member of Parliament representing Kawempe North constituency in the National Legislature. Doctor, let me start with you, but I wish you to register a few comments regarding the question of the additional 3 billion which the Parliament is, State House rather, is seeking from Parliament to meet certain new and urgent expenditure before we go into the aspect of paying tribute to the Honorable Ssegirinya.
Yeah, certainly on that issue, I agree with my colleagues, and I think that point is well articulated. That the whole issue about supplementaries is definitely a nuisance, to say the least, because we already operate, you know, the nature, the structure of our budget, that we as a country can only finance hardly 55% of the budget. So the rest of the money is either borrowed money or handouts. And I think it just goes back to life, even as an individual, as a person. You need to know what your pocket is. So if you know you have a small purse and you are choosing to live above what you have, it's only definite that it's a matter of time. You're going to hit a rock. So as a country, if our leaders have chosen to put us on this path, we have already had warnings from the IMF, we've had warnings from the World Bank. In fact, the IMF last week has issued a serious indictment report, and that confirms what many of us have been saying. There is research, surveys in different vital social sectors that show that the spending. Yeah, like I was trying to say that IMF last week issued a report which is a direct indictment on government. This report shows that government needs to raise up the level of spending. I think from what they are calling 18% to probably about 41% in vital socio-economic sectors. And they look at health, they look at education, because they say if government continued spending at the level it's doing, we cannot get any serious transformation. So in very simple terms, what we're saying is that the health services we're getting are substandard. They are mediocre. The education we are getting is substandard. It is mediocre. Of course, in comparative terms with what, and the comparison is not even with the globe. The comparison is just in the Eastern Africa region. So when you hear this insistent demand from the president, you know, when we continue saying state house, we are even confusing. This is what do they call it? Obfuscation of politics. This money is going to one man, the president of Uganda, his immediate family members, and his cohort. This is where state house expenditure goes, because in terms of budgetary framework, that is just one unit. So the issue is that the parliament surrendered its powers, and now we have been besieged. For me, the only thing I can say, as I keep arguing, debate around these issues is important. We need to continue talking and talking and talking. For me, the citizen has to get to know this issue, because the citizen has the last card. And for me, in as long as we have an informed citizen, this madness will stop. Because these members of parliament who have betrayed us after us entrusting them with our agency should be kicked out. For me, that is the issue around supplementary.
Thank you, Doctor, for your perspective. Apollo, let us now turn to the aspect of paying tribute to the late Honorable Ssegirinya Muhammad, the former Member of Parliament representing Kawempe North constituency in the National Legislature, who passed on under very pitiable circumstances. As we all know, he's been a first-term legislator, fairly young, and he had quite a rough time in that parliament. I think barely some 2 weeks into taking his oath, he was apprehended and charged with the offense of terrorism and murder, arraigned before the High Court in Masaka, where he was repeatedly denied bail. And subsequently, he was remanded, and after a very long period of incarceration, he was released, but in a very, bad situation, healthy situation and shape. So we are dealing with a very pitiable case, sorry case, and we have now to contend with the sad reality of his demise. The question I want to put to you is that when you covered Parliament in the previous term, did you have any kind of rapport with him? What are your impressions of the man before we discuss his legacy?
We commiserate with the family of Honorable Ssegirinya upon his demise. But, like you said, Honorable Ssegirinya did not spend much time in Parliament. Actually, it is on record. He spent more time in prison than in Parliament. And the time he was outside, he was out of prison, he also spent more time in hospital than in Parliament. So we did not have that close interaction, but I know him as a person, as a local leader, and from Parliament, from Honorable Ssegirinya being a member of Parliament, and his personality, his successes rising from just a radio caller up to where he has been. It's a successful career of politics, short as it is, and young as he was at 37 years, getting to that level in our current structure. You give him credit in one or another. But I look at the personality and career and legacy of Ssegirinya as a reflection of the current politics, the politics we have today, where the population is now looking, is not looking for solutions from people like me and you who put on ties and suits, but people who they can associate
Identify
with
with.
freely and identify with. And from another angle, I look at it as also his legacy to be a point of debate that can possibly help us change the dynamics of politics in this country. Because you cannot say Ssegirinya is, if he was allowed, because I'm convinced he was not allowed to do his legislative work freely, because he was arrested, like you say, immediately after swearing in, and he was even denied bail, because if he was given bail, he would have time to sit in that parliament. But even if he was allowed to come to parliament and do his legislative work in and outside parliament, I came to agree that he would not also make a good legislator if we are to look at the roles from the roles of a legislator, because look at the issues that are now that define his legacy today. They talk about a person who built a health center in the short time he has been in office, a legislator in his constituency, a person who has been who was helping even the people in his communities with money to start up small businesses. Ideally, those are not the specific roles of a legislator. We would want to have legislators in parliament who would articulate issues on the floor of parliament, who would scrutinize, like the professor said here, the documents from government, the business from government, and then present alternative views and positions. I don't think Ssegirinya would actually foot that bill in one or another. But anyway, that is the politics that we have today. And that is why I'm saying, well, we can credit Ssegirinya for his activism work, because he was good in the line of activism. We remember how he would take food to people, try to take food to people, to patients in Murago, on wheelbarrows. He would fight the digital migration, trying to push that voice, to amplify that voice of the common man. In activism, he was very, very, very good, and a very good leader at that level. But if like I said, you would want to ask him to do, for instance, on a committee of parliament, to do some work on a committee of parliament, of course he would not make it the way, to your expectations. So I credit Ssegirinya, rest in peace, for that courage and charisma he had as a leader, but also I think his legacy should also open debate on how best we can now structure our politics to bring leaders who would fit in the responsibilities of their office.
Professor, Ssegirinya case has spotlighted the failures of our criminal justice system, in a sense that as a member of parliament, the wider public is of the view that he would have benefited out of his constitutional and fundamental right to be released temporarily on bail, so that he would access specialized medical care given his overt healthy challenges. But rather, the judiciary responded with a very iron-fisted hand, the approach was not compassionate at all. And here we are. We are witnesses to the sad new reality that we've got to contend with as a nation. So for the country's politics and contextualizing the judicial system of the country, what could be the implications of this scenario?
With due respect to your question, I wish that question could be addressed to my neighbor who is a lawyer because it has legal implications. So for me, let me first amplify on what my neighbor on the left talked about. I think I also commiserate with the family of Ssegirinya. He was a good individual, charismatic. He dramatized politics, and I think grassroots mobilization, he was the right person who would be better as a social movement person in mobilizing the communities, community mobilization, or at least a community local government leader like LOC3 chairman, or even at best maybe LOC5 chairman. So you can see he was charismatic. He could identify with the people, and the people supported him. People got excited, and then he used that drama running around in town and highlighting some of the issues which you and me could not highlight, and highlight issues that are very critical to social development of Uganda. So that is what I can comment. However, as he has pointed out, this is now an indicator. You can see how popular he is. Even if he went back at this time, he would get possibly 90% of support. So now can you see how Africa works? How we have defined legislature. The cardinal principle role of a member of parliament is to legislate. But now we are looking at a member of parliament as a service delivery provider. So we have redefined the role of parliament in Uganda. Because a legislator should be somebody who can infuse certain new ideas. He's from opposition. We have got, let me give an example of development paradigms. We have got human development paradigm vis-a-vis the economic growth paradigm. Somebody who can understand some of those paradigms and give alternatives. You are talking about monetary policy vis-a-vis fiscal policy. Would he differentiate the two? So when you are legislating, making laws, you need a certain level of appreciation of ideas that make a modern state. But for him, he is popular, and you can see he's popular with the people, and his legacy is going to be followed by the ones who are going to follow. So his legacy is going to be that now people should behave like Ssegirinya in order to be elected back. So we need more drama. And so that is how Parliament has been, where Parliament has been reduced, not the other legislation. But I wanted to comment upon the government action, his incarceration. Here we are not, me and you, we shouldn't be talking about the technical aspects of it or the judgment aspect of it. We don't know whether he had committed the crime or not. That one we are not very sure. That is for the judiciary and the government DPP's office to do the work. However, this business of arresting and detaining, incarcerating, jailing political leaders, especially of opposition, is taking us to, is it the English word, to a precipice, somewhere like we are going to fall somewhere. You can imagine since the NRM system or NRM came into power, nearly every politician who has stood as opposition has been in prison. Chiza Besigye has been there. Kyagulanyi has been there. Amama Babazi was arrested. Tumukunde was arrested. The other day, Mao was telling us he's still on police bond. this man who was unaddressed is whose shoes were removed.
Amuriat.
Amuriat, you saw how he was mishandled. But even before them, even those who didn't go to court, I one time saw these old men like Ssegirinya and Ssenyonyi being tear gassed. And even at one time, I think it was Ssenyonyi, they pushed this water, the water cannon on him, and the man's coats were stuck on his body and things like that. So, I mean, in a situation like that one, it is politically dangerous, because somebody can even die in such a scuffle. And when people are arrested, you remember when they detained, they didn't even arrest him, but he was detained at a roadblock at the Cathedral of Buganda, and we had more than, 60 people dying here in Kampala, and almost Kampala was paralyzed when we were being asked to walk.
Now more than 90.
When we were being
Kayunga rights.
Kayunga rights, when we were being asked to walk like Baganda, and some people twisted their cabin and it was beaten. They thought it meant walking like stylistically. And when Kyagulanyi was detained for a few days in Jinja, we had very many people lose their lives here. In such a scuffle of continuing to arrest, by the even Nebesa, when he came from South Africa, the other time, many people were clobbered here in Kampala. In such a situation, God forbid we can lose such a person, and then we shall have a crisis here.
So Kayunga, they were like 26. For it was Kasese where they were more than 90. Kasese.
Yeah, you know, no, even Kayunga, they were more than 26. I am saying this arresting business is very dangerous. You know, the First World War, the Second World War, now a historian has forgotten his history. When the Sarajevo man was killed.
The first.
Yeah, the First World War. Just
Prince Ferdinand.
A prince just died, and the whole world was engulfed into a war. So it is not that that prince was killed that caused the war, but that the conditions were ripe almost. They were ripe for such a thing to happen. So we have this situation in Uganda where we are being held together not by conviction or not by consent, but by coercion. You get me? Consent versus coercion. We need to hold together. We need to build a nation. You know, my petty thing is building a nation. We need to build a nation state where we come together, hold together, live together by consent, not by coercion. And so if we imbibe this violence as a means of resolving divergence, we can reach a time when we can have a crisis here. For heaven's sake, let us be sober enough to avoid using coercion in order to resolve political competition. I have said it here and I will continue to say it. People normally say, you know, you people found Uganda. Uganda has ever been there. It will always be there. I will still give the example to those who have not listened to me. There is no Soviet Union. It disappeared. You know, Soviet Union had 21, I think, those Soviets. Where is that now? It is only Russia. There was a country called Czechoslovakia. It is now Slavia and Czech Republic. It's separated. There was a country called Yugoslavia. It's not long ago. You know Yugoslavia? It is now 6 states. That's our Yugoslavia. Can we talk about even a state being there in Sudan now, especially North Sudan? It's not there. Look at Somalia. It is a failed state. Look at South Sudan. Look at what is happening in Congo. Is there a government now in Eastern Congo? So we wouldn't want to reach such a scenario. And one way of avoiding that one, I think it is to have civil politics and be slow on arresting. Now, in the case of Honorable Ssegirinya, yes, we don't know exactly why he was suspected, and he was a suspect and he was arrested. Every government has to do that at times. You have to use at times repression. At times you can use ideology. But still, when he was taken in prison, And at one time he showed us those feet of his, you know, rotting feet. You know, if the state was not ready, if it had not collected evidence to take him to court and for trial, why not leave this young man go out and get treatment? Now you can see the interpretation it is being given. We should be united in ideologies. We should be united around ideologies, united around ideas, united around ideals, united around principles, not united in anger. You know, even some people are saying that it is imprisonment which made him sick. I'm told the Honorable, may his soul rest in peace, I'm told even during swearing in, he was already sick.
Yeah, he's sick.
But now this act of imprisoning him and not allowing him to get out for treatment on bail, I mean, what would it have cost us? Ssenyonyi has been out on bail with him. He's around, and has he caused the Uganda to collapse? Why wouldn't the courts and government generally have allowed this young man to get out and get treatment, and we avoid this unity in anger? Because now people think government killed him, he fell sick because he was in prison. Why do we cause ourselves that trouble? I mean, somebody like Ssegirinya, when he showed us his feet, the way they were rotting, the following day, court should have given him bail, he gets out and gets treated. And I think this anger that is created that government killed him will not be there. So please, government, let's move away from prioritizing coercion to consent, to convincing people. If I can be used to use Marxist language, I don't know how many Ugandans follow those Marxist terminologies. The state in Marxist terminology is made up of two elements. There is what they used to call in Marxist terminology. This was French terminology, I think, by a certain Arthur. They were saying that the state has got the RCA, that is repressive state apparatus. You can use it when there is a threat of integrity of the state. But he also said that the state has got another element, which is ISA, that is ideological state apparatus, which in today's terminology we can say is software and hardware. So let the government somehow shift away, unless there is a threat, an existential threat of disintegration of the state, to move away from the repressive state apparatus to the ideological state apparatus. And we convince citizens about our programs, about our legitimacy, and we move on. Because otherwise, there is a danger of, God forbid, one of these politicians. I saw soldiers last time when actually Kyagulanyi was campaigning in Jinja. There is a way the Kyagulanyi vehicle bypassed a roadblock, and soldiers shot his vehicle. He shot at the tires, and the vehicle fell down. Supposing a bullet had caught Kyagulanyi. Last time we lost 60 people. Are you sure we couldn't lose, I don't know how many people here in Kampala, and the property lost, and also the disintegration of the state? Let's be sober enough to avoid uniting people in anger. Let's unite people in ideals and ideas and values, not unite people in anger, because such actions of incarcerating people, incarcerating politicians, incarcerating those who stand for presidency, unites their supporters in anger, which is not healthy for nation building, state building, and even democracy and security and peace. Uniting people should be uniting people in ideas, in ideals, in policies, in interests, not uniting people in anger. The actions of harassing these opposition leaders unites their supporters in anger. And I'm a historian, I can tell you, I have somehow read the history of such state collapse or state disintegration. They disintegrate around uniting certain sections of the population around anger. And these actions of arresting unite people around anger. So supporters of the late Honorable Ssegirinya are united in anger, and which anger could have been dissuaded by that time when he showed us that he was really sick. And I'm told there were medical reports, but also he showed us his feet. They would have said, Ssegirinya, you go out on court bail, seek treatment. And even the government would have avoided this expenditure. I'm told they have already spent more than $1 billion on him. At that time, if he was allowed to get out, possibly less would have been spent. So this business of wanting to arrest, you know, Amamba was arrested because he has stood. Kyagulanyi is arrested because he has stood. Besigye is arrested because he has stood. Mao is arrested because he has stood. Tumukunde is arrested because he has stood. I mean, we need to shift away from the repressive state apparatus to the ideological state apparatus. That is Marxism. For those who don't follow Marxism, you can leave it at that. Thank you.
That's a sobering lecture, Prof. Doctor, the case of Honorable Ssegirinya Muhammad, Apollo pointed out correctly that it's his legacy, you could say, is contested. On the other hand, because he was armed with a modest education and sheer willpower, he was able to forge out for himself a path that catapulted him to the highest, possibly position of authority in the country, the parliament. That's a central institution of the state. But we also realize that he's not someone that you can cite as the model legislator for the population. So what does this say about the current state of our politics? Because if we have now lost him, that's a fact that we concede. Is it a ominous sign of what is to happen, even as the country accelerates towards the new electoral cycle?
But Mr. Moderator, why doesn't he also help us to appreciate the other legal aspect of it?
He's now invited.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yes.
Okay, maybe to actually start with the legal perspective. The Ssegirinya legal debacle, if you like, probably is not the only one. There are a number of other examples that actually show our criminal justice system in crisis. I will just take one for say purposes of time, and also not want to get into this whole legal jargon. Look at the case of Kwagala, the former LRA. The story is Kwagala was abducted as a child and all that, and that is the alibi, and that his defense team, tried to put across, and the argument was that it was an irony for somebody who was let down by the state, who should have been protected, the child who should have been protected by the state at the time, is now here facing trial, So, and we know that there was also amnesty running parallel. And Kwagala, while I think in the first years of his incarceration, the lawyers advised him to denounce rebellion and seek amnesty, and which was the procedure. And he did. And actually, he got amnesty. But then there was a twist. Later on, he's arraigned to court, and the trial begins. And then the defense team also, in a very clever defense strategy, institutes, a counter action, and want to argue the constitutional matter first. And they actually win. And they say, Kwagala, just like the many other former LRA combatants, got legitimate amnesty and had an entitlement to the amnesty. What happens? The DPP swings into action, appeals the case. And all this was running concurrently. Remember, Kwagala stayed in incarceration for 10 years, before the actual trial and indictment. So this tells you a lot, because all these instances we're talking about, the conditions for bail and the conditions for bail, and all these other constitutional rights accorded to an accused. And we have seen, and for me, that is the broader realm I would want to look at it, the constitutional rights accorded to the accused. We have increasingly seen how government apparatus, including the judiciary, have deliberately chosen to abuse them and have denied it not to one person, not only to Kwagala. It now comes to the case of Ssegirinya, because a question of being sick, even having medical records, having the medical board, which is the highest medical organ in a country, sit and concur with the defense that the man actually needs treatment outside of what he is getting. And so you just look at that kind of arbitrary abuse to power. What else? How else small can this government be? So, and it's not just court. I don't know whether you have followed the Chirud case, where that particular NGO has tried to take on government and argued over the issue of, the threshold of financing in health. And you see what is interesting about this government is that it's really a government of many courts. When they go to these international forums and in attempt to look like global citizens, they are quick to sign on all these international instruments. We are actually, we have signed on that accord of the minimum, health expenditure of, I think, up to about 7% GDP. But we have never put it in practice. What instead you see happening, and maybe that is the other dimension to our debate, is that the other apparatus that are in active cohort with the attitude to oppress are the ones that are being funded. You track the police budget from about 2014, to date. It was only as the means of financing. They literally, there are some of the things you'd see and you'll ask yourself, are we in a state of war? Just like the professor was talking about this incident of Kyagulanyi. And I mean, I have had the opportunity to live outside this country and see elections. And there are times in some of these countries, you have to be reminded that campaigns and an election is going on. In Britain, the British who fund us get their members of parliament walking on foot to people's residences and knocking doors and saying, I'm here, I'm presenting myself for service and all. So what is this paraphernalia?
Tear gas.
If you're already an inept MP, you are already, and then you think by speaking on a microphone makes you any wiser? So I just don't agree. But of course, the other thing that I want to mention without forgetting is this question of, yes, the whole process of who the model MP is and what an MP should do is known. But I think also we have gotten to a point where I think we need to debunk, just as we are trying, as a matter of theory, to debunk this whole colonial legacy that was left with us. I find particularly people like Ssegirinya and those of his like, the dramatizing of politics, I think allows us to have a much more inkling into what goes on. Because everything about politics is meant to look so serious. And yet, this is just life. Because what is politics? We're talking about health, we're talking about education, we're talking about food. Look at the American population. The sole reason the disgrace with the Afghan war. They quickly entered into now the Ukraine war. They have this both ideological, economic and finance war, which is already at its height with China, technological war, and but they have still kept that decency and still argue that, like Professor is saying, there is another day to life. And it just does not have to be a contest. So one of their biggest arguments has been, look, in the macroeconomic credential, you're giving very good figures. Biden yesterday was saying they created 17 million jobs, and which is true, because the American economy, right from the time of Obama, was turned into a vibrant economy overnight. But at the end of the day, they are not, the inflation just cannot be curbed. They still go to the supermarket and find the price of milk is unaffordable. I know. Look, bring that back to Uganda here. What is going on? We have all this, this NRM has learned the art and the tradition of reciting GDP. I no longer listen to the president's speech, because for me, if you randomly picked one speech now and the one of 10 years ago, you'd think it is the speech of today. I know the structure, I know the intro, I know the conclusions, so I just don't. And it boils down to the ordinary person. What is this for you at stake? The ordinary person, through this UPE thing, can hardly sustain their children at school. They can't even find the food. The climate change is here with us. And all these issues. So if you have people who probably can dramatize some of these issues as Ssegirinya and create a conversation, for me, I find them elite in their own right. I actually disagree with this notion of saying Ssegirinya was not educated. Ssegirinya was street educated. And that is an education, because that is where we are, our reality. Not all of us can get, these people are educating their children in Europe, in Malaysia, and we can't afford it. But let's agree as a people that there is an education we can access. If we can get educated on the streets of Nakivubo, that is the education we need, and that's the education we can get. Not that we shouldn't demand what is owed to us or what is due to us in terms of standard and all that, just like we are doing now. But there is hope in the Ssegirinyas of this world, and I think for me, we need more of them. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Tolitto, for your perspective. Dogo Apollo, your concluding remarks on the program.
Well, I must appreciate the time. I appreciate the submissions of my colleagues. We continue to commiserate with the Honorable Ssegirinyas family. And but what I maybe have to conclude with is that it is time. When we are talking about the legacy of the performance of the leader of opposition, and we are right in an electoral season, we should also start thinking of how we can bring capable leaders in positions of leadership. It is time when we'll have an opportunity in 5 years to also participate in the building of our leadership structures. It's the only time when we ordinary people can express ourselves on the leadership, all the leaders we need. So I call upon the viewers and everyone to actively participate in the electoral activities. And when time comes for elections, let's go for those people who have the caliber and capabilities to lead us, and who understand our problems, and who are ready to work for us, not for themselves. I appreciate the time, and until next time. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. Apollo. Prof, your closing remarks.
My closing remarks will be just a continuation of what I was discussing a while ago. I would like to call upon the political class of whatever persuasion to revisit our nation building process and tackle this question of militarization, securitarization of the whole process of nation building. Let's try to come up with systems, methods, processes of bringing people together through conviction, convincing people, and consensus and consent away from coercion. We reduce coercion unless the state is really at the brink of collapse and there is existential threat to the state integrity. Because if we continue casually using force the way we are using it, by the way, all sides are using it, and we are going for elections, you are going to see militancy, you are going to see violence. Even in NRM primaries, you saw violence. Then between NRM and the opposition, you saw violence. Now, if we continue at that trajectory, we are increasingly uniting certain groups of people, social categories of certain persuasion. We are uniting them in anger. You know, people, you should be united in ideals, in values, in norms, in interests, not in anger. So you find people are angry and they are opposed to the other group because they are angry. Not only those who are actually oppressed, no, even those who are not oppressed, you find them united in anger. Now look at the members of NRM also, the way they behaved vis-a-vis Kyagulanyi. Why did they boycott parliamentary session really? When their colleague was Ssegirinya was brought, the body was brought in parliament. It seems also they are angry. Even the NRM MPs and the NRM cabinet are angry with Ssegirinya, even in his death. And so we need to turn a leaf in this country to build a nation. To build a nation. Otherwise we can go like Yugoslavia. When I say such a thing, they say, Professor is a doomsday person, whatever. But when somebody warns you in advance and you don't take heed, when they happen, all of us will be victims. But otherwise, this is not how to run the country towards a united, integrated Uganda. We need to integrate all social groups in the country, and let's avoid uniting people in anger. You find people are angry with their colleagues to the extent that maybe when somebody passes by, another one looks the other way. So much so that people refuse to go to parliament and pay respects to their colleague. Why? Because I have seen quite a number of people, MPs, who die, unfortunately, may their souls rest in peace, and they are brought in parliament. I see people all going there and commiserating with the families, but this time around, it seems as if people were angry with Ssegirinya. No, we need to turn a leaf.
They're not actually angry. You know, these people have been captured. They were afraid. You know, there's something interesting in happening in this country now. And in all sectors. I mean, I come from the academia and research. And I will tell you that we have colleagues who will now not want to take your call or want to be seen with you over coffee.
Yeah.
Because they have crossed. You know, there's that popular phrase now. And people are crossing for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, but in cue with what the professor has just said, for me, again, it's a clarion call. Yes, it is true. Uganda existed before us. Uganda will exist, but in what form?
It can even disappear.
Do we want to leave it? You know? So, mine is a clarion call, and I want to make it from two important junctions, if you like. My first junction or point of departure is again Parliament. You know, Isaac, this same Parliament, again in that, and you know that interestingly in constitutionalism, our constitution 1995 in 2015 was 20 years. And that is a generation, you know, where we thought probably that was the time we could assess this constitution, and also that probably this constitution had come to fair maturity. But this is also the point of departure where almost all that we had achieved in that constitution was almost lost wholesome. You point to us that we're going into an election year, and yes, and I know that I have said it here earlier that this is going to be a year of events, and it started even earlier than I projected. I thought maybe coming to March or May, but you see, we started with the Besigye thing in December and all this, and this is not going to stop, because Parliament, where these checks and balances ought to be done, has become pretty weak. Look, this is now the last year for Parliament. In that same constitutional amendment of Section 4, this Parliament decided to go and tamper with that clause that had initially prohibited, you know, the crossing of persons or in Parliament to another party or another representation. Because in the Constitution then it was clear that if you did, then you would automatically lose your seat. But to show you how selfish these persons are and demonic, they went tampered with that clause. That makes them very, very vulnerable. Actually, Parliament now is up for sale, because anything that is coming this year in this last phase towards, you know, the election, and we have many things at stake. We have electoral reforms that have never been seriously concluded. And even again around the electoral reforms, this same constitutional amendment decided to entrench, you know, the position of the members of the Electoral Commission. It is pretty difficult to try and get out a member of the commission, because now that amendment says it is only the president that can appoint a tribunal. The same president is the appointing authority. I told you Biden this morning said we should be wary of concentrating power in one person. So the attitude of this person, we cannot tell whether tomorrow they're waking up in a good mood or in a bad mood. And then the last one they did, we again going, we know that the strength of any election basically lies on the level of civic awareness. And we know that government on its part traditionally has not done much in civic awareness. It's the non-governmental organizations that have been doing civic awareness. But the amendment to the Non-Governmental Organizations Act, in spite of the much work that was done to it, finally came out with very little changes other than so many gray areas. It's going to make the civic space is already narrow, but with the current law governing the NGOs, they are going to find it very, very difficult, because there are sections of that act which gives a lot of opportunity for grey arrests. So it is so easy to find yourself in trouble, and some of them point to very serious charges, because there is that element of, is it it's some, I don't remember the phrasing clearly, but it points out towards you having integrity and being able to protect, you know, what they're calling foreign interference. Now that is very difficult. How? you know, just me, who probably goes to my little village and I want to give legal education or awareness. Supposing now I find myself with a donation of $1,000 from a source that you are saying is hostile to Uganda, I would have found myself in a situation I cannot comprehend. So we at a very precarious juncture. So all we need is, let's make a last appeal. And I want to make this appeal through the words of the late poet, Sergeant Okingbo. Let our legislators at least have this in mind, even if they throw out every other thing. Okingbo, after the Biafran War, said, "For all we have lost and the least we have gained, please don't leave my grave unmarked. Don't leave my grave unmarked," which is a very serious thing, because if they want to die and we forget about them, we shall.
Thank you, Doctor, for your perspective. Once again, I must appreciate you, gentlemen, Dr. Charles Tolitto, Atia, Professor Mwambutsya and Nebesa, and Mr. Apollo Tusiime, for your able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament, and for your very serious reflections to the citizenry out there. We appreciate you, our esteemed viewers, for keeping us company from the start of this program up to its conclusion. Many thanks to the production unit for keeping us live on air. Our dear viewers, please engage us on our various social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can also watch this program. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.